So we light that fourth candle, just the King in the centre, on this final Sunday before Christmas, the last Sunday of Advent. And when Joseph learns of Mary's forthcoming child, he obeyed the message of the messenger from God, the angel. It's so easy to underestimate the role and place of Joseph in the infancy stories, how important he is. He was so significant in the nativity stories and his relationship with Mary and what he had to offer. Remember the place he must have had in the life of Jesus as he grew as a child into a young person. I just remind you that in Luke 4, when we read about how Jesus went back to Nazareth, and there is all the kerfuffle as Jesus reads in the synagogue there, the passage from Isaiah 61, and the questions about what he did, they say, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" He was known as Joseph's son. Joseph must have had such an influence upon Jesus' life. Let me read to you from Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through to 21. This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet didn't want to expose her publicly to disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you're to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." This early scene in the drama of the gospel is so significant. You see, Joseph is much more than just a nice guy. He displays qualities that I want to draw your attention to. Two in particular that are going to be important at the very beginning of the ministry of Jesus and throughout what must have been true for Joseph and many other of the earlier followers of Jesus. Firstly, faithfulness. It's there in so much of the teaching of Jesus. And it's great to think that Jesus' earthly father displayed something of that faithfulness. Faithfulness to his wife. Faithfulness to what he was called to do. And faithfulness in being an example in the home. From what we know, Joseph probably died early in the life of him, so that in fact, when it came to Jesus' ministry beginning, it appears to be only Mary still alive. He would have a special responsibility then, as the eldest boy in any family would, to look after his mother. So faithfulness would be so significant, it would be so important. And as far as Joseph is concerned, like the men of the day, they had a responsibility in their home. I remember going to Nazareth, underneath the church there. It's not a small town anymore. Even when I went, there was something like 70,000 people that lived there, mainly Palestinians and mainly people living in a teeming in fact, the city's bigger than that now. And the church there is a church that has underneath a place that is meant to replicate the kind of workshop that Joseph would work in. But there is a famous picture of Jesus with his arms outstretched behind Joseph at work. It's a shadow of Joseph working on the carpenter's bench. So very, very important. He was faithful. But he also had a willingness to rise above public opinion. Now, I think this aspect is something that we would be very unwise to miss. The story that the nativity stories are trying to tell us is this would be a disgraceful position to find yourself in. To find, in fact, that your wife is to have a child and you're not married and all that went with it. It would be difficult for some today, but certainly in the time of Jesus, it would be very, very difficult. And so for Joseph, it would be an enormous challenge. But he rises above all that. He doesn't want to put away Mary. He doesn't want to divorce her. He doesn't want to do something that would have any element of public disgrace at all. So he was unafraid, if you like, of what people might say. He was going to rise above what public opinion might have easily led people to consider and to conclude and to think. he was rising above all that to something better. Joseph perhaps is not considered in the story of the Nativity anything like as much as he should. When it comes to the children's Nativity, Joseph is not the leading actor, it's Mary. It's Mary and of course a child that comes. And he's there stood, very few words very often. It's all the other people who come looking. There are wise men, there are shepherds, there is the knocking on the door. Sometimes he's the one that's allowed to ask the innkeeper if there's any room in the inn. But the truth is, Joseph has a critically important part to play, and one that teaches us a great deal that I think can be meaningful in this Advent and the upcoming Christmas season. We can learn a great deal from him. So Joseph is there. Joseph accepts Jesus as his son. And we have that most amazing declaration at the end of this passage that is there for all to hear. She will give birth to a son, and you're to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. That's the nature of the gift of Jesus Christ.